Welcome to another episode of Unscripted with SST, the LinkedIn live show, where we deep dive into the real, unfiltered world of IT, cybersecurity, and business technology. Brought to you by Secure Strategic Technology, we're here to cut through the noise, share expert insights, and tackle the challenges shaping the future of managed IT services, live, raw, and unscripted. Joining me today are Peter Kujawa, VP and GM of Service Leadership, a ConnectWise company, and Beau Elston, the COO at SST. Welcome to today's show, gentlemen, and thank you for sharing your expertise.
Hey,
Uh,
Tracy. Hey,
yeah.
Bill.
Hello.
So, Peter, Beau and I are on this show every 3 weeks together. Occasionally, we do have guests, but so we really do appreciate you coming on and giving us some of your insight. Before we kind of dive into today's subject matter, can you give us a little bit of background on what you do do for service leadership?
Yeah, sure. I run actually a couple of business units that was recently updated. I service leadership financially and operationally benchmarks the I managed service industry worldwide. So VARs, MSPs, others who do different business models, app dev, different business models all over the world put their data into our system every quarter. And every quarter we get to run the data and be able to report back to those companies what good looks like. We've been doing that for 20 years, so we have a really strong perspective on what great IT looks like, great IT services. And we talk in terms of operational maturity level. We rate our companies, the companies that benchmark on their OML. And we think the same thing exists for buyers. So I deal in the data is the short answer. I also run the IT Nation organization, which is made up of about 800 IT companies that are in peer groups all over the world. And we do large events and other things to help IT companies do business better. So in the process, I have perspective on tens of thousands of buyers of IT services based on what I do.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, so all of your experience and Beau's experiences, I think, are really going to be useful for today's conversation. So the title of the episode is How Businesses Should Approach IT. And really, what we're going to be talking about today is, how do we align our services with business outcomes, reducing the, reactive noise in an environment, and really kind of putting that CIO kind of hat on, right? And looking at it through their lens is kind of what we're going to get into today. I guess before we do jump into it, any other comments or questions that you guys would like to bring up?
No, let's go.
Let's rock. Okay. Sounds
Do
good.
it.
So I guess the first thing that I wanted to talk about with you guys is um, there are several different approaches to IT. Kind of maybe we categorize them in kind of four areas, if you will. And then the first one is, and Peter, I'll give this one to you, and just you can add some thought to it. The company that thinks of IT as an expense. You've seen this. What would you like to say about that type of approach?
Yeah, we look at IT buyers on a continuum. As I said, we look at operational maturity level of IT buyers. So if you're a small and medium-sized business, particularly, what's your approach to IT and IT services? So this is not just a hardware question. In fact, if anything, these days, it's more of a service question than a hardware question. And so for us, there's a spectrum of buyers, and the lowest end of the spectrum is the buyer that views IT really hostily. They hate it. They don't want to be in the room when it's talked about. I own the business. I like doing what I do, but if I never had to hear about IT again, I'd be happy. I hate writing checks for it. It's just a big sinkhole of an expense. That's the lowest end type of buyer. And unfortunately, it's a pretty decent sized part of the market today.
What
Um,
percentage would you say?
well, that and then the next level of buyer is the next level of operational maturity level for a buyer is a buyer who understands they need IT services, and they're going to write the checks out that they have to, but they view it as a necessary evil. Again, they're not like super engaged in it. We think that between those two segments, that's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to 70% of companies out there today. And contrast that, the buyers, there's definitely buyers out there that that are check a box buyers, especially if they're regulated folks. They know that they're working with HIPAA or they're working with some other regulation. They need to be doing certain things. They maybe don't understand why or what exactly what those are, but they know they need to be able to hand a piece of paper over to somebody at some point to keep doing business. So if you add them in, I'd say you're at least at 70%. The next type of buyer that every company really should be these days is a strategic buyer, somebody who really understands the impact that IT services makes on their business outcomes. First of all, that if my goal is to grow my business, if my goal is to take care of my customers and do all these things as a business, I need great IT to be able to do those things. And if I don't have it, it's going to hold me back from being able to achieve my strategic plan over the next few years, because I'm just not going to be able to move the needle. But they also understand the risk that today, it doesn't matter where you're located. It doesn't matter if you're a big company, small company, whatever. I think a lot of small and medium-sized business owners still are maybe going to bed feeling comfortable at helping go to sleep, telling themselves that, hey, I'm in this small town in Wisconsin or Minnesota or wherever, and so hackers aren't going to come after me. I just have a small business. I'm only doing 5 million a year revenue or whatever the number is, right? They don't care. They don't care who you are, where you are. They care that you have money and that they can get it out of you. And they won't even know who you are until they've got you most of the time. So there's a huge amount of risk. You can work your whole life building this business up and not even realize how much risk you have until it's too late. So the strategic buyer really gets that. The owners, they're engaged. They want to know how they can do things better. It's just a different mentality as an owner.
And so you think, Beau, I'll go to you and you can add some color to that if you so desire, but that 70%, now is that increasing or decrease? Like, what's the trend there? Do you see, is it getting to the point where there's more and more things happening to force people over the other side of the wall, or what do you think about that?
I mean, I don't know if it's probably not increasing. I don't think there's more people that are approaching IT that way. I think if anything, they're starting to shift into more understanding the need and the value of IT, but it takes a while to get there. And I guess, Peter, that'd be a question for you. Like, what are some of the things that you see that takes a company from looking at IT as just that cost center and like, I just don't want to spend any money, to start understanding the value of IT?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of times that's a lesson that has to be learned the hard way. And for many business people, and there was a time I ran an IT company for 11 years prior to my current role, going into that almost 4 years ago. There was a time that if you were a bank, you took security seriously. If you were some other highly regulated business, maybe a hospital or some other healthcare institution, or maybe you were doing services for a certain Department of Defense or something. Other businesses looked at it like, why would I spend money on that? That's a lot of money. It's crazy. And then they get hit, and the remediation cost, their business is down and reduced to a notepad and a pen for a period of oftentimes weeks. They can't service their customers. They lose business. It's a nightmare from a stress standpoint. Insurance might help them a little bit, but never fully. They have brand reputation, all of these different things that hit their business. And oftentimes, until that happens, they don't take it seriously, unfortunately. And that's like, I realized time to put locks on my doors and put in an alarm system was after I was robbed and my house was cleaned out. I mean, it's not a great time to realize that, right? But a lot of times businesses will become aware that maybe it wasn't them that got hit. Maybe it was another business person that they know or somebody else in their town that woke them up to the risk that they have. So that, and I think just understanding, getting frustrated with trying to do different things, and you go to events and you hear about all the things that are possible, and you come back to your business and you're like, wait a second, why can't we do these things? And I think there's a combination of reasons, but I think, if anything, I think these days it's moving in a positive direction. I think more and more buyers out there are getting more operationally mature and understanding the need for this stuff.
Well, and I would like to think too, it's reasons, it's education by you and by Beau and myself as well, right? There's a lot of people out there in the MSP space that are providing more education around the importance of these kinds of things than maybe even 3 years ago, right?
Yeah, for sure. The managed service industry is a larger industry than most people recognize. Today, there's about 40,000 managed service providers out there in North America alone. And so it's not like it was 10, 15 years ago where companies, you talk to them and they'd be like, what? I'm not going to have an IT guys down the hall in my building. I don't get this. Today, it's become such a more accepted model. And you're right. There's so many of us out there evangelizing and really talking about these different factors that drive success that I think businesses today just have access to a lot more information on.
Yeah. You can decide to invest in these kinds of things we're talking about early on at a much lower price point, or you can decide to invest in them after the fact, which is going to be a way different, way more expensive kind of a experience for sure. So let's talk a little bit about then like traditional kind of break fix mindset in an organization, and maybe why. And we've talked about this a little bit, Beau, in previous conversations, but this is again one of those subjects that you probably can't talk enough about, like why break fix does not work, in what should we be doing differently? Either one of you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of speak to kind of the journey that most of what we see, a lot of these small and medium-sized businesses that we work with, they start out with IT just, because it's everywhere, and they start to use it. So they get an internal guy or somebody who's just a little bit more techie, and they start to use it. And then they just, that's how they never had a plan with it. Right. It was just, they started using it. They had to fix it when it was broken, and they just haven't recognized the need for more. Right. And they just kind of, that's how they operate, right? Wait till it breaks, then fix it. And it's just that becomes, their IT environment, and they don't know anything different, right? And so it's easy for everybody to start out that way. People aren't starting out with this just really mature IT organization. It's just, hey, we got a computer, we got, a cloud service. We start to use it to run our business, and when it breaks, we fix it. I don't have much more of a plan than that.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean,
think about it this way. You wouldn't do that with your car, would you? Would
you do that with yourself? Yeah, I guess some people do.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people that do. That's probably, but your car, you take it in for an oil change at a certain interval. You do routine maintenance. You're doing different things. You wouldn't say, well, the car's running fine. Why does it need an oil change? And I hear that all the time in IT that, well, everything's working okay. Why do I need to be spending any money? Well, you need to be spending money on it from a preventative maintenance standpoint, so that you avoid noise and you avoid things breaking. Because every time something goes down in your environment, there's an actual cost to you as a business that goes beyond what it costs to get the issue fixed.
Yeah. And I liked the statement you made earlier is you build your whole life, or you spend your entire life building this business up. These are the things you need to do to protect all that time and effort that you've invested, and protecting, all of your staff, all of your clients, for sure. So I guess the opposite of the break fix kind of mindset is, taking the strategic approach that we talked about. and I guess what that looks like for a modern business. Can you guys talk to that a little bit? What does strategic IT really mean today?
Yeah, I can give my opinion on it. I think the more inclusive of a wraparound type offering a business can purchase, the better off they're going to be. And the reason for that is if I buy security services from this guy and I buy other IT services from this other guy, those services may or may not be working well in conjunction. But if I work with a company who has a team of experts and that team of experts can bring me best in breed technology that there's no way I'm going to be able to get access to as a small business if I'm not working with a managed service provider, the type of technology that enterprise has access to, I'm going to want a full suite of stuff that's working together, that's minimizing what's the noise coming out of my environment. My people are able to get online, they're able to do their jobs, they're able to work remote, they're able to do all these different things that today you need to, and you're able to do it securely. You're also better able to take advantage of automation as those opportunities continue to come along. And I'm going to have somebody to give me strategic advice in my business on what things I should be doing. So I think working with a company that looks at it that way is really important. And another thing I think is really important as a business leader is that you send the message to your team that this is important. We're gonna do what we need to, and you stay engaged. The great IT companies do quarterly business reviews. They're doing strategic discussions with the leadership of the business. Some business leaders will delegate those and they'll delegate the tasks associated with that. And they just don't love IT. And I get it. It's not necessarily the most fun thing for a lot of business owners, but it's really critically important that the president, CEO, owner be present in those meetings and be able to speak to what are they strategically working on? What are their growth goals? What are they planning for the next couple of years? Are they going to be doing acquisitions? All of those kind of things. Because the IT company needs to align their delivery to that and do it in a way that gets ahead of the curve so that you're not always behind and trying to catch up.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, though. You talk about like understanding the business, and I think that's something, like I don't know if a lot of MSPs or like IT people in IT are even really thinking from a business perspective, right? The IT is there to support the business, and a lot of times you go in there, it's just like, hey, this is our computer, this is how we do IT, and it's disconnected with the business itself, and so then you're having conversations with the business leaders, and you're speaking two different languages, and it's like I don't want to talk to the tech people, right? We're not just somebody else deal with that rather than like, okay, this is in business terms. I want to make my business better. How can IT help that, right? And that strategy in making sure you understand, where the business wants to go so that IT can meet the needs, for where that business is going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that requires a degree of openness from the business leadership. Mm-hmm. I've seen business leaders and the IT company goes in there and we'll work with the IT company on the content for the QBR and preparing and everything. And they'll go in there and the technical account manager or VCIO will say, well, tell me about your revenue growth goals for next year. And the business leader will turn and go, I'm not telling you that. You don't need to know that. And so I think in that case, you need to do a better job explaining the context and why I'm going to be asking you some of these questions and everything. But for the IT relationship for most businesses is going to be one of the top two, certainly top three most critical relationships that you're going to have as a business. You need to have a relationship of trust and confidence and really understand how important it is to be fully aligned with your IT company because they're an extremely critical vendor for you as a business.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I like it. Like you talked about operational maturity levels for MSPs. The same applies to businesses and businesses MSPs are working for or working with, right? And if you say, as we gain in operational maturity, we're going to get out of that break fix. We're going to get more strategic. And now, instead of even focusing, when we get a good information security program kind of embedded, Now we're really driving efficiencies within the business with technology. Now we're way ahead of the curve, right? That's where we want to be. We're sitting down maybe with the manufacturing facility, figuring out, hey, how are we going to change this line to gain more efficiencies? Some physical things with regards to how the business works, but you're a critical piece, right? You're talking about how the technology is going to align with their outcome of gaining efficiencies on this assembly line or whatever it might be. Yeah, good. What about, I guess, some early signs that a business has outgrown the current IT setup that they have? I mean, what do you see? I'm sure you see this all the time, Peter. I mean, can you talk to that a little bit for our audience?
Yeah. Are you talking in terms of the service relationship or in terms of the overall tech stack, or what
I
are
mean,
you referring to?
all of it's fair game, right? I mean, just like all of it. Anything there, I think, is valuable.
Yeah, I think if I put myself in the business owner or business leader's shoes and look at it that way, what's my relationship like? Do I have a high degree of confidence? Do my employees have confidence when they call into this company for help? Are the issues addressed quickly and in a fashion that effectively fixes the issue going forward? Is the company coming into me with recommendations about what I should be doing with technology, or am I having to go to the MSP and ask them for what things that I've heard about? How proactive are they with me, and how proactive are they with our environment? Are they providing me with a budgeting and roadmap that I can use for the next 12 to 18 months so that I have a good idea of upcoming significant project spend? All of those things are indications that I've got a relationship that I want to continue to build on and have confidence in. My experience is if the company's doing those things and doing the right things right, the last thing I'm going to be looking at probably is going to be what I'm paying them. If they're really doing those things and they're preventing surprises, they're keeping me safe, my business is running well because of them, they're worth their weight in gold. I mean, it's an incredibly valuable relationship to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Beau, you have anything to add to that?
No, really. I think Peter put it very succinctly.
Yeah, for sure. So we have about 8 minutes left. I guess with the remainder of time here, do you have any, Peter, do you have any success stories that you could call to, and like an example kind of scenario where somebody did actually, maybe it's post-event or not, where when they started to be strategic with the relationship with IT, how it impacted their business? Any story you'd like to share?
Yeah, I don't have a specific story, Tracy. I've seen dozens and dozens of cases over the years where companies, when they found the right company, and they were just how much happier they were in their business life. I mean, I prior to running an MSP, I was CEO of a fintech company for 7 years, and I had two MSP relationships, and I found them both to be extraordinarily frustrating because I was the one who always had to ask them for what's next, and I could never get good estimates for my budgeting. So every year I would say, what did we spend this year? Let's add 10%, because who knows? I can't get any estimates that are realistic. And then you get surprised with some huge spend one day. So when it's working well, it's such an asset to the business. It's an incredible force multiplier. There's a reason why this industry has become so valuable to small business. I mean, one story I would tell you, Tracy, is we ran the data on what occurred, and we wrote an article, a newsletter a few months ago for Service Leadership about what the MSP industry achieved for small and medium businesses in the early days of COVID. And I'm convinced that literally the SMB economy worldwide would have fallen apart, especially in North America, if it wasn't for the MSP industry. That MSPs move tens of millions. Estimates are somewhere around 70 million in North America alone, employees in a span of a week or two to working from home. And the airlift that the industry did for for small and medium businesses out there was incredible. And so, businesses wouldn't be able to do that kind of stuff and stay safe and continue to support their employees in an ever-changing, more complex environment if it wasn't for great MSPs doing their job right. And so it's a really important industry to the economy as a whole. So finding the right company is really important.
Yeah, good. I mean, that's good. I like, kind of a success. And then if you're not successful, what does that look like? So let's end with this before we wrap up. Beau, if you had to come up with a list, like a wish list that you like, I wish business leaders knew this about IT. What would be on that list?
A few things come to mind. I think the first one we deal with a lot of companies that are making that transition or starting to change their view towards IT is understanding that the technical debt is a real thing. Putting all of this off for some period of time and not dealing with it doesn't make it easier to deal with in the future. And taking that on and having a plan it's better to do it early because it's just going to get worse down the road. I mean, we've had conversations with customers like, we're still small and, we'll probably deal with some of that stuff in the future. And it's the best time to deal with that stuff is right now. You're going to accumulate that technical debt and it's pretty dang expensive. And then the other thing we've talked about, during this one is just making sure IT is part of those leadership conversations. Like IT needs to be in there, needs to be at the table because you're just missing out by not enabling IT in your business. And kind of the last thing along that line is, from an MSP perspective is, you're outsourcing your IT, but not the responsibility. You need to have leadership still have part of, a role with IT. You're the champion of IT and enabling IT to do what it needs to do to empower the business. And so having that engagement and starting at the top is a very important thing because it just permeates through the whole business.
Yeah, Beau, that's a great point. I had a case once years ago of a company that we were working with. We went in to meet with them, and they were using non-complex, non-expiring 4-digit passwords, and this was a regulated business. And so we did an assessment. We looked at how these guys were doing things, and it was categorically a train wreck. And said to the office manager, we got to fix this. This is a ticking time bomb. And the office, why would you possibly have your password set that way? And she said, it was a law firm. The managing partners don't want to change. And so we go to them with the recommendations. They don't want to change. Well, that's a business that's going to get hit. We had another business that came to us after getting hit with ransomware, and the owner said to the office manager, well, why didn't you buy what would have prevented this? And she said, because you wouldn't approve my budgets. I kept coming, and you kept saying, this is all we can spend on it. So that's all I spent. And so the owner or the most senior leader can either send a message of support and make sure that this stuff gets done right, make sure the employees are doing the right things in the business, or they can undermine it and make sure that they don't do the right things, even if the employees are trying to. So really, really important that the owner or senior leader be on board.
Top down, embedded in culture.
You bet.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's a wrap on today's episode. Thanks again for joining me here today, Peter, and Beau. Thank you as well. I guess if your IT strategy feels like duct tape and luck, it's time for a better approach. Let's build tech that fuels your business and not frustrate it. For more information, you can follow us on LinkedIn and we're on Instagram and Facebook as well. So technology should drive your success, not just support it. We'll see you next time on Unscripted with SST. Thanks again.